This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And welcome into the Primetime Podcast here on Most Valuable Podcast. And Brandon, this was a show that early on I was like, okay, we're going to be talking some coaches. It's going to be a full coaching show. It still is, but the Rams in the NFL kind of threw us a curveball today by firing Jeff Fisher.
The Rams, I think, threw their fans a bone for the holidays. They had a little early Christmas present. At 4-9, and you're not letting some of your star former players on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Just things were not going well. And I think that with the young quarterback that the Rams have and the kind of the young team that they have too, you need the right person being there coaching, and Jeff Fisher clearly was not the answer there. So they're going to be looking elsewhere, possibly in the college ranks, and we'll get into that later.
Well, and I bring that up because you might be saying, well, Ricky, Jeff Fisher's an NFL coach. How does that fit into college? Jim Harbaugh. That's why. We're going to be talking about Jim Harbaugh later in the show. Should he leave Michigan to go to the NFL?
Ricky, you should have teased it out. You should have teased it out.
Everyone knows which coach we're talking about, Brandon.
You should have teased it. Okay, not everyone knows.
Okay, I'm not a teaser this week. I'm going to give you everything up front. Talking about Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. We're going to look at the Baylor Bears and their situation. Jared Stidham leaving. What does that mean for them? What does that mean for Auburn? And then we're going to start actually with the biggest news. The big news, Lane Kiffin accepted a job this morning with the Florida Atlantic Owls. He's going to remain on as Alabama's offensive coordinator until the end of the playoff run for about 2 more games, kind of like what Kirby Smart did last year. But Brandon, this was a move. We're going to get right into it. This was a move that kind of shocked some people. I mean, it was Friday where people were like, okay, it could happen. Over the weekend, they're like, okay, talks have kind of stalled. And then Monday, a deal was kind of struck, and Lane Kiffin was announced as the head coach of the Florida Owls. You being an Alabama fan and just a Crimson Tide, Roll Tide, everything about you, well, besides the Fighting Irish part, but we're not going to talk about that. What was your first reaction to Lane Kiffin getting the Florida Atlantic job?
He's going where? And why? That was honestly the first reaction. I didn't believe you when you had tweeted.
When I texted
you didn't tweet. You texted me this morning. And I had a feeling, in the last couple of days that he was going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But when you texted me and you said that Florida Atlantic, really?
I like how you used the shorthand too, the FLELT or the ATL, and you're like, who? I'm like, Florida Atlantic.
Because I could. I was just like, he can't be going there. He can't be going there. I mean, you leave this premier top dog school in Alabama to go coach in the bottom of the barrel. And, I'm happy for Lane Kiffin because this is what he wants to do. He wants to be a head coach. He wants to be a head coach. I think that I think it really is a bummer for Alabama and Alabama fans because I think he's done a really good job with that offense. I mean, you can clearly see that by what he did last year. I mean, you're able to make Jake Coker into a formidable quarterback option and a guy who, did enough to make your offense pretty good. But then again, you had Derrick Henry. And I think that Lane Kiffin has done a really good job since he's been at Alabama, and I think he's done a really good job this year with Jalen Hurts, true freshman quarterback, who I've been just raving about all season long. I think that Alabama will definitely feel this one. I think that they're going to be just fine because they always seem to be, but Lane Kiffin has been there. I mean, I know it's only 3 years, but in those 3 years, he's done a lot of good things. In those 3 years, you've won a championship, and you may win another this season. Very good possibility that you could. As long as you do what you need to do, what you've been doing all season long, you win back-to-back championships. But I'm happy for him, but I'm surprised in a sense that this is where he's going. He's taking a pay cut. the overall budget is much less than Alabama's. I mean, it's way down there.
Well, I mean, what budgets are going to be? There are some close to Alabama, but really what's going to be a team that was out there right now that's going to have a budget close to what Alabama has?
No, I understand that. But, I mean, I think that if you go to Texas, obviously huge, but that's not who they were looking for. They were looking for a different guy. If you go to Houston, I think it's getting bigger, but he doesn't get that position. I just think with this, Sean Anderson said it earlier this morning as we were going back and forth through text message. There is no expectation here. After a 3-9 season for Florida Atlantic, there is no expectation. So he's going to a spot where USC, huge expectations. Tennessee, huge expectations. Right now at Florida Atlantic, there is no expectation. There is no expectation for you, especially after that 3-9 season that you have this past season. So Lane Kiffin, he has a program that he's taken over that he gets to, I won't say dismantle, but that he gets to completely retool and make his own. And I think that for him, that's going to be really good because I think that fans are probably, look, you win 4 games, you've already done better than what you did this past year. You win 5 games, it's like, woo-hoo, we might get a bowl game. Because these days, all you need to win is 5. But I think that it's a loss for Alabama. It's a definite gain for Florida Atlantic. But I'm surprised in the move to Florida Atlantic. I will be very honest. The move there surprises me. The move in general, not so much. But the move there does surprise me.
Was I surprised with you? Yes. I was surprised that Lane Kiffin was going to move to Florida Atlantic wasn't a team that I thought like he'd actually go to. But when me and you were even texting each other and you were like, hey, you know what? I don't like this. I think he should stay as an offensive coordinator. I don't think he should make the move to the head coach. I'm kind of on the side where my first thought was exactly how Sean was thinking of it. This could be a great starting point. Well, I say starting point. He's been a head coach before, but this should have been the starting point that Lane Kiffin had when he started head coaching because you look at where he's been, it's kind of a unique kind of a road to where he is now. I mean, going from basically tight end coach to wide receivers coach to OC for 2 years at USC, and then boom, magically making the jump to NFL head coach where he didn't have too much success with the Raiders. Then he comes to USC where it's like, you know what? You've never been a head coach before. That's a place where if you don't start winning, especially where USC was in its history. If he came to USC now for the first time, everything would be a little bit different. Like if he was there beginning of this season, things would have been a little bit different because USC isn't in the same. They're getting back to a great team, but they're not in the same place they were post Pete Carroll. Then, I mean, Tennessee, which was before that. Tennessee is also a town where we're talking about Butch Jones each and every year about could this be the year he gets fired because he's just not producing. Yeah, they're kind of winning some games here and there, but they're not really in the hunt for a national championship each and every year. Two fan bases that expect a lot out of their team. He's going to a place where I look at the overall record of this Owl team, became a football team for D1 in 2001. So they're a relatively young program. Overall, from 2001 till now, an overall record of 76-115. In their conference games, which the first 5 years they were an independent, 37-54. This is a team that's not used to winning. The 2 best seasons that they have had, 2003, they went 11-3. The time they finished first in their conference, they went 8-5. Both of those years were under Howard Snellenberger, the great coach for the Miami Hurricanes from the late 80s, the one that really kind of started that Miami Hurricane kind of a run to championships. He was really the one that started this program as a coach from 2001 all the way till 2011. Then ever since, it's been you had Carl Pelini, the brother to Bo Pelini, who was at Nebraska, and then the guy who just got fired in Charlie Partridge. So this to me is the job Lane Kiffin should have had. This should have been his first head coaching job when he first started being a head coach, because at a school like this, you can kind of make mistakes here and there. You can have a bad season and teams go, okay, as long as there's improvement because of what we're used to. Now, I'm not saying like he can go in there and go 3-9 for the next 4 years because this team went 3-9 for the last 3. No, but this is a team where he can kind of get his footing of what does it mean to be a head coach? What have I taken from Nick Saban with my time with him? What have I learned from my mistakes in the past? And to me, a big thing, and this was a big kind of aspect that they were talking about with Lane Kiffin and why Houston didn't really give him the job, was Lane Kiffin X's and O's. It's fine. He's going to do you a good job, but is he going to kiss up to the board? Is he going to kiss up to alumni? Is he a guy that in recruiting is going to kiss up a little bit to get the best recruits to come in? Now, Florida Atlantic, he's going to be looking at far different recruits than you were looking at with Alabama, but still, there's a little bit of, and this goes for any job, there's a little bit of sucking up that you got to do to certain people.
There's also going to be a lot more competition. He's going to be competing against Charlie Strong and Butch Davis for guys. Now, Butch Davis is going to get his guys. I think it comes down, you want to go with Lane Kiffin? You want to go with Charlie Strong? I think that's what it might come down to. Obviously, there's other guys that he'll compete against, but those are some of the bigger names right now. I think that, Ricky, one of the things that you touched on was a really good point, and this is where he should have. He should have started his head coaching career at a spot like this, because if he had started at a spot like this, he could have been at a Texas right now, possibly. He could have been at a Houston right now, possibly. And right now, the reason why no big Power 5 team banked on him is because they don't want to be the next USC Lane Kiffin project. They don't want to be that. They need to win now. They want to win now. Florida Atlantic, they have 5 to 10 years to figure it out.
You look at Houston, Tom Herman brought them up to a place where not only we were talking about them being in the hunt for an invitation to the Big 12, but they were going out competing with teams like Oklahoma, like Louisville this year, and they were actually in those games, even beating Oklahoma. This is one, like you said, can't be a Nick Saban project and take a step back with your next head coach.
Well, absolutely. And I think, again, a point you made is you got to see, and other teams will want to see, because you think this is really Lane Kiffin's last stop?
No,
Florida Atlantic.
It's
It's a building block. It is a stepping stone to something bigger. Lane Kiffin does not want to end his career at Florida Atlantic. Who would want to? Who would want to that's aspiring to be a big-time head football coach? I do not believe Lane Kiffin wants to be back in the NFL. I don't think that anyone would take him. But I do think that Lane Kiffin wants to be back at a team like a USC because he believes he can do it now. I think he has gone through a lot of growth being at Alabama, being under a coach that just knows how to win in Nick Saban, knows how to win in college football. And I think he's been able to learn a lot from him. I think he's been able to learn a lot and craft a lot of things as an offensive coordinator. I think that his offense, he's going to make that offense a lot better, but he's going to be working with a whole lot, you're going to be working with a group of guys who are just at a lesser caliber of athlete than what you're getting at Alabama. You're getting a lesser caliber player. And I think that that's what's going to be the difficult part. That's going to be the culture shock for him. Not only is he getting a lesser caliber player, you're getting lesser caliber facilities, you're getting a smaller budget, you're not getting as many analysts to be able to look at film with and break down plays with. It's like moving from a top NAIA Division I school and then as a coordinator and going to NAIA and being a head coach. You all of a sudden go from, you got all these facilities, all this fancy schmancy, you got silver spoons here and the good shyness coming out here, and every day it's, coming to work, everything's wonderful. Then you go to the NAIA where you're like, oh, my assistant won't take care of that? Oh, no. You are the assistant. You are the head coach. You're the assistant. Mm-hmm. You're this. You're that. You're this. You're that. And we don't have money to do this or that. And that's the practice facility right over there. It's just not glamorous. And it's not as glamorous.
Here's the thing I want to bring up. And this goes back to my point of this is going to be, to me, first off, Lane Kiffin had a choice to make. He was at a not a fork, a try kind of.
Was he at a fork in the road and he took it?
It was kind of a fork in the road because on one side, it was like a road where this is going to be a weird road. There's one fork, but if you chose the one path, there was another fork. And the reason why I say that is the original fork was, do I stay as an offensive coordinator or do I go to be a head coach? He chose the head coach, so he chose to go left. If he chose to go right and stay as an offensive coordinator, that next fork was Alabama LSU. And to me, this is Lane Kiffin going, I want one more crack. I want one more crack to try to be a head coach because it's one of those things where being 41, you're still relatively young compared to your counterparts in head coaching. This is probably the one where it's like, if I'm going to get back to that high job, I have to start somewhere. This is where I start. This is where I should have started before, and I'm kind of going to be a late bloomer in the game.
But he doesn't want one more crack because this is not the end goal. Florida Atlantic is not the end goal. You said he wants one more crack.
The journey is the one last crack. If he doesn't succeed at Florida State,
Florida Atlantic. He's not at Florida State, everybody.
Is he ever going? I'm taking Florida State because I'm going to bring up Jimbo Fisher in a second. That's why. But if he doesn't succeed at Florida Atlantic and he never turns that program around, I'm not saying he has to make them an 11-3 team, but if we don't see improvement from them over a couple of years, do you think any of the big schools are going to go, yeah, that's a guy I want? So this is kind of his last crack.
They will offer him offensive coordinator positions for days.
But I'm saying as a head coach.
But then do you think, okay, Lane Kiffin, he wants to go be a head coach. He's going to be a head coach at Florida Atlantic. He's going to be a coach of the Owls. Do you think it doesn't work out there. Let's say it doesn't work out. Unfortunate as that would be. They offer him somewhere else, good school, offers him an offensive coordinator position. Does he take it or does he say, you know what? I don't want to do it anymore?
Yes. No, I'm saying the last crack is as a head coach.
Ricky, yes, I got what you were saying. I then went on to say what I said, but you get that.
Yes, okay. He'll go back to being an offensive coordinator because it's going to be one of those things where he's going to then realize, okay, this is my role in college football. I'm a coordinator. Because the thing that I was going to bring up is you look at Lane Kiffin, and he was at USC in 2001, and then he was also he was at USC as a tight ends coach in 2001, eventually made it to the offensive coordinator in 2006. That's a total of 5 years. That is a small amount of time to learn everything that you need to then jump to a head coaching position. The thing that made his worse, he jumped to not just a head coaching position, he jumped to one in the NFL. I pulled up two coaches, Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban, and looking at their time in college football just as assistants. Jimbo Fisher started his assistant journey in 1993 and did not become a head coach until 2010 when he took the job at Florida State. That is a ton of time as an assistant to kind of soak up different situations. He was a quarterback coach. He was an OC at Cincinnati, an OC quarterback coach at LSU. He was the offensive coordinator quarterback coach at Florida State. He soaked up a lot of knowledge in a lot of years. You look at Nick Saban, he kind of has a similar thing. started in 1975 as the linebacking coach at Kent State. He didn't get his first head coaching job until Toledo in 1980. So for Nick Saban, it was Toledo, but then it was 1 year and he was done back as an assistant and then didn't get a head coaching job until 1995. That's almost 20 years of an assistantship with one head coaching stint in there. That's the big difference with Lane Kiffin. He only had 5 years and then jumped right into head coaching. His experience as a head coach and what because I'm assuming he's learned stuff under Nick Saban. I'm not saying he's going to go in there and be the next Nick Saban, but with his experience and what he's learned from Nick Saban, I think Lane Kiffin's going to be, I'm going to say successful at Florida Atlantic, but successful to me is not like they're an undefeated team. They're what Houston is. No. A successful team to me is bowl eligible. He will make them bowl eligible in maybe 5 years. I'll give them 5 years and they'll be bowl eligible under Lane Kiffin.
Now, you think that it will work out for him there. Do you think that this was the best move for him? Do you think that this was the right move to go there instead of staying at Alabama?
And if you were just going to leave it up to head coaching jobs, I was going to say yes, because this is a way better move than going to a Houston, going to a Texas, even going to a South Florida. But
not what I'm saying.
But your question was the OC, and I'm getting to it. I heard you, Brandon. It's a tricky one, and that's one that I'm going to sit there and go, I can't answer it because it's all on preference. To me, it's going to decide right or wrong depending on what happens at Florida Atlantic. Because if he does bad at Florida Atlantic, we're going to look at it and go, should have stayed at Alabama. If he turns around that program, makes him bowl eligible in a couple of years, then we're going to say, okay, he made the right decision to move on. If it was me, I probably would have stayed as the offensive coordinator maybe one more year. I honestly would have, because to me, a job like Florida Atlantic wouldn't have been appeasing enough. A 3-9 team, but at the same time, I could see why, like I said, I can see why he took it, because the most important thing about this job, there's going to be no pressure. There's going to be absolutely no pressure for Lane Kiffin. But I would have probably stayed at Alabama. Well, I know you would have stayed at Alabama, but I want to hear your reasoning.
See, the whole thing is that I would have stayed at Alabama if he wanted to continue to win. But if he wanted a new challenge and he wanted to challenge himself and he wanted to, move on to the next stage of his life, his career, then I would have made a move. And clearly that's what he wanted to do. I'm happy for him. I think that he will be happy because he's going to be on the path to hopefully one day being a head coach in a big program, a good program. But who knows? Maybe he would turn it around completely at Florida Atlantic to make them into a big program. But right now, that looks to be an outside shot of doing that, of making the program good. I think I could see that, making them very respectable, but turning it into a program anywhere near some teams in the towards the top of the SEC. Now that is hard to believe, but I am happy for Lane. I am sad for Alabama because I think that he was a really good fit there as an offensive coordinator, but we see it in the NFL all the time. I really liked Adam Gase as the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears, but when someone gets to be really good, as it happens all the time, they realize that they're good. They realize that they can make some more money going elsewhere and that they can move on to the next stage of their career. It happens all the time. We're talking coaching, or we're just talking the everyday normal jobs outside of coaching, out in the real world with the non-sports. I think that that's just how it is. And I'm happy for him, but I think that Alabama will be fine because the big man's still there, Nick Saban. Well,
and the last thing I kind of want to touch on is apparently there are already reports that Lane Kiffin has his target for who he wants to be his quarterback as he moves over to Florida Atlantic. And here's an interesting one. He wants Blake Barnett to be his starting quarterback, to come over with him to Florida Atlantic. And you might be sitting there going, well, Ricky, why do you say it like it's so interesting? Barnett, redshirted as a freshman in 2015 by Alabama, was named to be the starter this season, lost that job to Jalen Hurts. This past September said, I'm going to transfer, and then in December said, I'm going to transfer to Arizona State. That's who Lane Kiffin wants to say, no, Arizona State, I'm going to go be with my boy Lane Kiffin and go down to Florida. If you're Blake Barnett, do you make that move? Do you spur Arizona State to go to Lane Kiffin and Florida Atlantic to be an Owl? Hoot, hoot.
Well, it all depends on your relationship with Lane Kiffin. If it was a good relationship with Lane Kiffin and you didn't want to play for anybody else because you felt the connection there with the offensive coordinator, then yeah, I absolutely do it. But if you didn't feel that, then I would, stick to your guns and continue with Arizona State. Now, if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm saying, hey, Jalen, you want to come on over? It's been fun, hasn't it, buddy? Come on. No, but I think that it will be very interesting when Lane Kiffin sets up his entire staff and has his team in place, because I will be watching that very closely, as I'm sure many of us will be.
Well, and I'm also interested to see how the recruiting game goes. If there's any recruits that do go, hey, I want to play for Lane Kiffin just because of the name, or if it's going to be, I don't want to play for him because he wasn't successful as a head coach.
He may actually get a little bit of a bump, not because of the name, but because of the name that he coached for before, Alabama. And people probably go, you know what? Yeah, you had Nick Saban, but you ran that offense. You had Derrick Henry. You had this. You had that. Again, people that Nick Saban is helping to bring in. But I think that people may go and want to play for him because he knows the Alabama system and may try and put that in place at Florida Atlantic.
Well, and this is where we're going to end the Lane Kiffin discussion. This is where you guys let us know down below what you guys think about the hiring. How do you think Lane's going to do at Florida Atlantic? And just your general thoughts of the hiring in general and what you thought of when you heard Lane Kiffin was going to Florida Atlantic.